Welcome to Stories for Sleep, where each story is not only meant to be heard, but to gently help you unwind and drift into a deep, restful sleep. Tonight, we will step together into a mystery that feels very close, yet also incredibly distant, something that exists within your own body, the story of negative blood, a phenomenon that makes science pause and invites the human mind to imagine. Only about 15% of the population carries this trait, a small number, yet enough to quietly challenge what we believe we understand about evolution. Is it merely a biological variation, or the trace of something deeper? Carl Gustav Jung once believed that what lies deepest within us is precisely what shapes us. If you are drawn to gentle journeys like this, you may subscribe to Stories for Sleep, so that each night, a story is always waiting for you. And now, just let go. We begin. Tonight, as every sound slowly fades, and you begin to settle into that familiar quiet before sleep, you may not realize that, within your own body, there exists a mystery that has never been fully explained. A stream of blood, quietly flowing with each heartbeat, carrying a history of hundreds of thousands of years, and perhaps carrying questions that science has yet to answer. About 15% of humanity carries a distinct trait, H-negative blood, a subtle difference, almost invisible, yet profound enough to make scientists pause and ask, why does it exist? According to evolutionary logic, traits that threaten survival tend to disappear over time. And yet, Re-negative carries a quiet paradox. In certain cases, a mother's body may attack her own child. So why does this still remain today? Carl Gustav Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Perhaps, just like the human mind, our blood also holds depths we have not yet touched. Tonight, we are not simply exploring a blood type. We are stepping into a journey where science, history, and imagination meet, where unanswered questions become doorways into your inner world. And as you listen, you may not find every answer, but you may feel something else, a quiet connection between you and the long arc of human evolution. Because perhaps the mystery is not in Re-negative itself, but in our deep longing to understand who we are. So just relax and begin with me. On a quiet night, as your thoughts begin to slow, you may notice that the smallest things within your body can carry the largest questions. Like a drop of blood, moving with each heartbeat, silent, unseen, yet holding a story science has not fully told. Among billions of people on Earth, about 15% carry this difference, Re-negative blood. Not rare enough to vanish, yet not common enough to feel ordinary. It exists at the edge between the familiar and the strange, like a small detail overlooked in the vast painting of evolution. What makes H-negative remarkable is not only its rarity, but something more difficult to explain. It is almost entirely absent in other primates, the species most closely related to humans on the evolutionary tree. And this absence creates a quiet gap in logic, a subtle opening, deep enough to make science hesitate. If humans evolved from common ancestors, why would such a fundamental biological trait not be shared? Perhaps this is where reason meets its limits, and also where, as Carl Gustav Jung once suggested, the unknown begins to awaken imagination. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. But what happens When the world no longer feels entirely comprehensible, H negative, in its silence, seems to carry an unspoken question. Are there parts of us that do not fully follow the rules we think we understand, or perhaps we are glimpsing a more complex system where exceptions are not errors, but traces of different evolutionary paths? As you listen, you may feel something very subtle, as if standing before an unopened door, not to find an immediate answer, but to recognize that your curiosity is itself part of the journey. Humans are always drawn to what is different, not only because it is rare, but because it reflects something deeper, the desire to understand who we are and where we come from. And perhaps, negative is not the greatest mystery. The real mystery lies in how we respond to it. Why do we feel drawn to it? Why can such a small detail in our blood create the quiet sense that something is not entirely as it seems? The answer may not lie in biology, but within the mind, in the unconscious, where symbols, fears, and the longing for connection quietly move beneath awareness. H negative, in its own way, becomes a symbol not only of difference, but of the human need for meaning. And as you lie there, listening, you are not only hearing about a blood type, you are touching an ancient question, one that has followed humanity for a very long time. Do we truly understand ourselves? Perhaps the answer does not come immediately, and perhaps it does not need to. You only need to allow yourself to remain with the feeling, a little curiosity, a little stillness, and a gentle openness. Because sometimes, within what has not yet been explained, we find the deepest peace, and from there, the story truly begins. As you continue listening and let your mind slow just a little more, you may begin to realize that H negative is not simply a small variation within the human body. It is not like eye color or hair color, something easily overlooked. It is a difference that reaches into the way the body itself functions, almost invisible, yet capable of shaping the most essential moments of life. Because blood is not just a liquid. It is the system that connects everything within you, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and biological information from one place to another. And when even a small element within that system changes, the way the body responds to the world may change as well. H negative is one such change. In blood transfusions, this difference becomes unmistakably clear. A person with HA negative blood cannot safely receive HA positive blood without the risk of a serious immune reaction. The body does not recognize it, and instead of accepting it, it may respond as though it is under attack. This makes H negative a critical factor in medicine, a small detail that can determine the boundary between safety and danger. But perhaps where this difference becomes most profound is in something deeply human: pregnancy. When an H negative mother carries an H positive child, her body may not always recognize the fetus as part of itself. Instead, the immune system may perceive it as something unfamiliar, another emerging from within. And in some cases, the body begins to react, to defend itself, even against its own child. It is a quiet paradox, yet a deeply moving one, a place where life itself must face the very system designed to protect it. And from a psychological perspective, this begins to resemble something familiar. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what happens when the other is not outside, but within?" Perhaps H negative is more than a biological phenomenon. It becomes a living metaphor for the way we sometimes fail to recognize parts of ourselves and react to them as if they were foreign. And when we widen our view to the world, this difference reveals another layer. H negative is not evenly distributed. It appears more frequently in some regions and almost disappears in others. This is not just a statistic, but a trace, a silent map of migration, of isolation, of human journeys etched into the biology of generations. It invites a quiet question. What flows within your body right now? Is it truly only yours? Or is it the result of thousands of years of people who lived, moved, and existed long before you? And as you reflect on this, you may feel a soft but profound connection that you are not just an individual, but part of a long continuum, an unbroken flow. And within that flow, H negative is not a minor detail. It is a meeting point where biology, history, and identity converge. And yet, the more deeply we look, the more we realize this difference is not loud. It cannot be seen with the eyes. It cannot be felt instantly. It does not make you visibly different. It exists quietly, like so many parts of ourselves. Parts we are not always aware of, yet which shape how we live, how we respond, and sometimes how we understand who we are. And perhaps that is what matters most. Not what H negative is, or where it comes from, but how it reminds us that beneath the familiar surface of every human being, there are deeper layers, more complex, more subtle, and sometimes still waiting to be discovered. As you lie there and feel your heartbeat, you do not need to know exactly what is happening within. You only need to trust that everything is working in a quietly perfect way, whether you understand it or not. And perhaps, like rage negative, not everything important needs to be seen. Some things only need to be felt gently and deeply enough for you to realize that you are part of something greater than yourself. And from there, the story continues to unfold. It cannot be seen with the naked eye. It cannot be felt immediately. It does not make you different in a way the world can recognize. It exists quietly, like many other parts within us. The parts we are not always aware of, yet they shape how we live, how we respond, and sometimes how we understand ourselves. And perhaps that is what matters most. Not what H negative is, or where it comes from, but the way it reminds us that beneath the familiar surface of every human being, there are deeper layers, more complex, more subtle, and sometimes still waiting to be discovered. As you lie there and feel your heartbeat, you do not need to know exactly what is happening inside. You only need to trust that everything is working in a quietly perfect way, whether you understand it or not. And perhaps, just like Ra negative, not everything important needs to be seen. Some things only need to be felt gently and deeply enough for you to realize that you are part of something greater than yourself. And from there, the story continues to unfold. As we begin to look at the map of Rho negative distribution, a quiet, unusual feeling starts to emerge, as if an ancient story is being drawn once more, not through words, but through the silent currents of blood flowing within human bodies. In a small corner of the world, the land of the Basque people between Spain and France, the percentage of Ra negative is significantly higher than in the rest of humanity, as if that place has preserved a fragment of memory that other regions lost long ago. And then, When we widen our view across the globe, we encounter something almost opposite. That in vast regions such as Asia, Africa, and among many indigenous communities of the Americas, H-negative nearly disappears or exists only in very rare traces, an absence that cannot be easily explained by chance alone. This distribution, if seen only through numbers, may appear as a statistical pattern, but if felt more deeply, it resembles an invisible map of migration, of isolation, of human evolution. And there, we begin to realize that not everything in nature is evenly spread. On the contrary, it is often the imbalance, the unusual concentrations that carry the deepest questions. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, what appears repeatedly within a group is not only biological, but may reflect a deeper pattern, a trace of collective history, what he called the collective unconscious. And if we look at H-negative through this lens, perhaps its concentration in certain regions is not merely the result of random mutation, but the imprint of groups of people who once lived in isolation, who loved, had children, and continued for thousands of years without blending into the rest of the world. The Basque people, with a language unrelated to major language families, with a distinct culture, and with an unusually high percentage of H-negative, seem like a time island remaining within the flow of history. They remind us that some parts of humanity have followed very different paths, and therefore carry traits that others do not. But what deepens this story is not only where H-negative appears, but where it does not. Its near absence in many regions raises a quiet yet difficult question. If this is a biological trait, why has it not spread like so many others? What has kept it within small pockets of humanity, instead of allowing it to dissolve into the whole? And here, we begin to sense something very similar to the human mind itself, that there are parts of us not widely shared, not present everywhere, but existing only in certain inner regions, accessible to only a few. Like personal memories, unique experiences, or emotions difficult to express, H-negative, in a symbolic way, is also an uneven part of humanity. As you listen, you may begin to notice that difference is not something that must be explained immediately, but something that can be contemplated, because it is precisely the unevenness, the gaps and clusters, that create depth in the world. And perhaps the true message is not where H-negative comes from, or why it is distributed this way, but that it reminds us that humanity is not a single uniform mass, but a complex tapestry woven from countless streams, crossing, separating, and sometimes quietly existing side by side, never meeting again. So, as you gently close this part, allow your mind to drift with that thought, that within you there may also exist such invisible maps, traces of the past, unnamed parts, things you do not need to fully understand, yet which are always present. And it is precisely that which makes you uniquely yourself in a very quiet way. And if we go a little deeper, not through reasoning, but through the slow, gentle sensing of someone drifting towards sleep, we may begin to see that the story of H-negative distribution is not only about science, but about isolation, about time, and about the invisible distances between people. Imagine, tens of thousands of years ago, when the first human groups began leaving familiar lands, they did not know that each step they took was not only changing geography, but shaping the biological, a future of their descendants. A small group settles in a valley, surrounded by mountains. They live, marry, have children, and over generations, their genetic traits grow more concentrated, more defined, like a melody played again and again by the same orchestra. Meanwhile, other groups continue to move, to mix, to merge, and rare traits like H-negative become diluted, fading until they nearly disappear. And so, without any external force, the journey of humanity itself quietly created a world of unevenness, where the same trait may be common in one place, yet almost absent in another. And if we look deeper, this reflects something very familiar in our inner lives, that what is repeated, what is preserved, what is protected within a closed space becomes stronger, clearer, like beliefs, memories, or emotions we have carried for a long time. They do not disappear just because the outside world changes. Sometimes they grow even deeper over time. And perhaps this is why, when we look at something like Ra-negative, we feel not only curiosity, but also something harder to name, as if we are seeing a reflection of ourselves on a larger, older, more expansive scale. You may or may not belong to that 15%, but that is not what matters most. What matters is realizing that every human being, regardless of blood type, is the result of countless choices, countless journeys, countless coincidences that happened long before they were born. And as you lie there, listening in the quiet of the night, you may feel something very gentle, that you are not separate from history, but that you are part of it. The blood flowing within you does not only carry oxygen, but also the memory of thousands of generations. People who lived, who endured, who adapted, so that you could be here, in this moment. So, rather than searching for a final answer, perhaps you can allow yourself to simply stay with the question, gently, without pressure, without needing to resolve everything. Because sometimes, it is the uncertainty itself that opens a space in the mind, a space for reflection, for stillness, and slowly, for rest. And as those thoughts begin to soften, to quiet, you may realize that not every mystery needs to be explained. Some mysteries are simply meant to be felt as part of life, like a deep, distant rhythm, quietly present within you. In a quiet laboratory in the late 1930s, where the light was soft and every movement slow and careful, scientist Carl Landsteiner touched something that seemed very small, yet opened a doorway into a profound mystery of the human body. It was not a loud moment, no spotlight, no applause, just a quiet discovery of a tiny protein on the surface of red blood cells, what we now call the Rh factor. When he and his colleagues conducted experiments with rhesus monkeys, they did not know that they were laying the foundation for a question that would last decades, perhaps centuries. The results unfolded. Like ripples across still water, most humans, about 85%, carry this factor, while the remaining 15% do not. A difference that seems simple, yet is anything but small. From the perspective of science, this was a major step forward, helping us understand blood transfusion, pregnancy, and how the body responds to others. But if we look more deeply, in the spirit of Carl Gustav Jung, every scientific discovery is not only data, but also a symbol, a mirror, reflecting the deeper layers of the human psyche. Because what is truly curious is not that 85% have it and 15% do not, but the quiet question beneath: why does this difference exist? Why, within the same species, does a small group lack something that the rest possess? And what has allowed this difference to persist through thousands of years of evolution? This question is like an unfinished dream, a vague image in the mind, impossible to forget, yet difficult to grasp. It reminds us that the world we think we understand still contains spaces unlit, unexplored, and perhaps it is in those shadows that imagination begins, that hypotheses are formed, that stories are told to fill the unknown. Some stories remain close to science, others drift toward mystery, but all arise from the same deep need to understand and to feel that we belong to some kind of order. And yet, if we slow down and let our thoughts soften, we may realize that not every question needs an immediate answer. Some discoveries are like doors opening in the night, not for us to enter right away, but to remind us that beyond them lies a space wider, deeper, and quieter. And so, Landsteiner's discovery is not only a scientific milestone, but also a gentle reminder that humanity, no matter how far it has come, still stands before the unnamed. And in that, there is a quiet beauty, a beauty of incompleteness, of continuation. As you listen, in the stillness of the night, you may begin to feel that numbers like 85% and 15% are not just statistics, but small traces of a long history, a history you carry within, even without knowing. And as your thoughts slow and questions no longer demand answers, you may let your mind drift, just as those discoveries appeared, quietly, unhurried, yet deep enough to remain, like a soft ripple, still moving gently within your stillness now. If we slow down further and look more deeply, we may begin to see that this evolutionary paradox is not a simple flaw of nature, but like a very small crack, revealing a deeper layer of life, where things no longer follow the rules we once trusted. A mother, capable of nurturing life, may unintentionally become a source of danger to her own child, simply because of a small difference in the Rh factor. When fetal blood carrying Rh positive enters the body of an Rh negative mother, her immune system may recognize it as other and begin producing antibodies against it. A response, designed to protect, becomes a source of harm, and within the silence of the body, a conflict unfolds, without sound, without visible signs, yet with profound consequences. Here, we touch a question far beyond medicine. If evolution always moves toward survival, toward optimization, why does a mechanism exist that can endanger the next generation? Why does nature seem to quietly work against itself? Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, we may feel this not only as biology, but as symbol. Within each human being, there are opposites, inner conflicts, between conscious and unconscious, between protection and destruction, between love and fear. And sometimes, what is meant to protect can become the source of harm when it fails to recognize what truly belongs to itself. The mother's body does not know. It simply responds according to patterns shaped over millions of years. And this reminds us that not everything in nature is perfect or guided by clear intention. Sometimes life continues, not because it is flawless, but because it is flexible enough to persist even with contradiction. And yet, within that paradox, we find something deeply human, the ability to become aware and to change. When science discovered the RH factor, when humans understood this mechanism, they did not accept it as fate. They intervened, protected, softened the conflict, and gradually created ways to heal. And perhaps this mirrors our inner journey. There are parts of us that react automatically, sometimes hurting ourselves or others, simply because they do not recognize that everything belongs to the same whole. And growth is not about removing those parts, but understanding them, softening them, and creating balance. The paradox of Rai-Maché, then, is not only scientific, but a quiet reminder that life is not always simple. There are things that exist between right and wrong, between protection and harm, between life and risk. And as you lie there, listening in the stillness, you may begin to feel that your own body is just such a system, a place where millions of processes unfold every second, most of them unseen, yet together they sustain you right now. You do not need to understand everything, because sometimes peace comes not from answers, but from accepting that life has always been this way, both harmonious and contradictory, fragile, yet enduring. And within that acceptance, your mind can begin to soften, to release its need to control, to explain, and simply feel your breath, slowing, deepening, becoming steady as you gently move through conflict and drift into sleep. And if we go even deeper, we may begin to see that the story of Ra-negative does not end with biology or medicine, but touches something deeper in the way nature itself experiments. Evolution is not a straight path toward perfection, but a long, winding flow, sometimes uncertain, sometimes adjusting, and sometimes leaving behind unfinished traces like Rh-negative. Over hundreds of thousands of years, small genetic variations appear. Some disappear, some remain, not because they are perfect, but because they are not harmful enough to be removed. H-negative may be one of these. A small deviation, persisting through time, like a reminder that evolution is not a perfect architect, but more like an artist, sometimes keeping even unfinished strokes. And if we feel this more deeply, we may notice a quiet parallel within ourselves. Each of us also carries such paradoxes, thoughts, reactions, emotions that do not always serve us, yet remain, repeat, persist, as if they still have a role we do not fully understand. Perhaps, like Ra-negative, they are not errors, but part of a longer process, still unfolding. Imagine, in a time before modern medicine, a mother losing child after child without knowing why. The pain was not only physical, but also a deep uncertainty, an unanswered space. And in such spaces, humans begin to ask, to search, to understand. In a quiet way, paradoxes like H-negative have brought humanity closer to knowledge, to understanding, to the ability to protect life. So perhaps what matters is not that nature makes mistakes, but how we respond to what is not perfect. We observe, connect, intervene gently until what once was paradox becomes something we can understand and eventually heal. And yet, even when understood, H-negative still reminds us that beneath every stable system, there are small elements capable of changing everything. A tiny difference in blood can shape life or death. And perhaps this is also true in our lives. It is not always the big things that shape our path, but small details, subtle choices, quiet changes that guide everything in unseen ways. As you listen, you may begin to feel a quiet sense of ease, that nothing needs to be perfect, nothing needs to be fully clear, for life to continue, just like the blood within you, carrying countless histories, countless unknowns, yet still sustaining you, beat by beat. And in that realization, you may allow yourself to soften, to release the need to beat, understand everything, and simply be there, listening, feeling, as your mind slowly drifts away from unanswered questions, like a leaf floating on calm water, gently, peacefully, naturally, moving closer to sleep. In the long flow of human history, there are pains that do not come from war, nor from violent disasters, but arrive quietly, repeating, like an unanswered question. Before modern medicine understood the RH factor, there were families caught in a cycle: hope, loss, hope again, and loss again. A child is born, bringing fragile joy, and then slowly weakens, fades, with no explanation, no diagnosis, no understanding, only silence and helpless eyes. The mother perhaps carried the deepest burden. She did not know that her own body, in an unconscious biological response, had become the beginning of the tragedy. There was no concept of antibodies, no arch, no science to explain, only a quiet sense that something was not right, yet impossible to name, and that inability to name made the pain even deeper, because humans can endure pain if they understand it. But when pain has no form, it becomes a shadow, spreading through the mind. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, this is not only a biological tragedy, but a collective psychological experience. Fears, unexplained guilt, dark dreams may have emerged from such moments. A mother might wonder what she had done wrong, whether it was punishment or fate. And when there is no answer, the mind creates stories, sometimes to protect, sometimes to deepen the wound. In small homes of the past, there may have been long silences, empty cradles, fathers carrying quiet helplessness, families facing something they could not see nor understand. And across generations, this pain became more than events. It became memory, a feeling passed on invisibly. What is striking is that all of this unfolded in the silence of science at the time. No reports, no clear data, only scattered stories fading into time. And yet, that silence made the tragedy deeper, because what is unnamed does not disappear. It settles into the collective psyche. And then, slowly, very slowly, understanding came. The RH factor was discovered. The immune mechanism explained. What was once mystery became knowledge, not erasing the past, but illuminating it. And as you listen, in the quiet before sleep, you may feel that this is not only a medical story, but a human one, of pain, of not knowing, of hope. And perhaps what softens the story is not only that it was explained, but that humanity eventually found ways to protect life. From loss without answers to healing with understanding, it is a long journey and a deeply human one. As you lie there, listening, remember that your body, your blood, carries not only present life, but a long history of what was once unknown, yet endured, continued, and was eventually healed. And in that realization, you may gently let go, Allow your thoughts to slow, as history itself has slowly settled into a quiet memory. And you can do the same. Just relax and let yourself drift into sleep. And as we continue to listen more deeply, we may begin to see that these tragedies did not remain only within individual families, but quietly shaped how humans understood life, birth, and themselves. In ancient societies, where everything was explained through gods or fate, those unexplained losses, they were often assigned heavy meanings. A mother might be seen as unlucky, or even suspected of carrying something unclean, when in truth, she was simply part of a biological mechanism that her time could not yet understand. And in such circumstances, the human mind begins to form invisible layers of defense. Stories, beliefs, rituals, all emerging as ways to face what cannot be explained. And through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, this is how the collective unconscious moves. It does not accept the emptiness of not knowing, but seeks to fill it with symbols, with meaning, even when those meanings are not entirely accurate. Imagine, on a quiet night, thousands of years ago, a family sitting together, no electric light, no machines, only the soft glow of fire and a long silence. No one speaks, yet everyone feels that something has been lost, something that cannot be named. And in moments like these, humans learn to endure, to continue living, even without understanding why. What is remarkable is that even without science, humans still adapted. Some communities may have unconsciously noticed patterns and changed their behavior without knowing the reason. Others simply accepted it as part of life. And over time, it was this very ability to adapt that allowed humanity to survive, even through what it could not understand. Looking back from the present, we see a clear contrast. What was once mystery is now written in textbooks. What was once fear can now be prevented with a small injection. But this does not make the past lighter. It simply reminds us that humanity has traveled a long path, from the darkness of not knowing to the quiet light of understanding. And perhaps the deepest meaning does not lie in raw negative itself, but in how humans responded to it. In helplessness, they still loved. In uncertainty, they still hoped. And through repeated loss, they continued, quietly, yet enduringly. As you listen, in that soft space between waking and sleep, you may begin to feel a gentle peace. Not because the story is without sorrow, but because you sense that everything, no matter how complex, eventually finds its balance. Just as your body now continues to breathe, continues to function, without your needing to understand it. And in the same way, human history, though filled with unanswered questions, continues to flow, to open new chapters until mysteries are revealed or simply accepted. So let these thoughts not remain as questions, but pass like a soft stream. No need to hold them, no need to analyze, only to feel. And then, slowly, you may let yourself drift into a deep sleep. After many generations of living in uncertainty, of repeated loss without explanation, humanity finally reached a quiet yet profound turning point. In 1968, the emergence of a solution called ROGAM was not only a medical breakthrough, but like a gentle whisper of knowledge. We are beginning to understand, and we can change this. ROGAM, in essence, is a way of guiding the immune system so that the mother's body does not recognize the fetus as other. A small mechanism, almost invisible, yet capable of stopping a chain of reactions that once caused countless tragedies. And from that moment, children who might never have lived could now grow, breathe, and become part of the world. Mortality rates dropped, not through miracle, but through patience, observation, and accumulated understanding. If we look more deeply, this is not only a story of science, but of expanding human awareness. For thousands of years, humans lived within the laws of nature, sometimes harsh, sometimes unchangeable. But with Rogam, for the first time, humans did not only adapt, they intervened, adjusted, and in a way, began to rewrite what once seemed fixed. Through the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, this may be seen as a process of individuation, when humans are no longer fully governed by unconscious forces of nature, but begin to become aware and engage with them. Before, the mother's body reacted purely by instinct, without awareness, without choice. Now, with medicine, consciousness has entered a process once beyond control. And this brings a quiet paradox. On one hand, relief. Life is protected, suffering is reduced. On the other, a subtle question arises: where is the boundary between nature and intervention? When humans begin to alter biological laws, they are not only healing, but also reshaping evolution itself. Yet perhaps, what matters most is not that humans control nature, but how they do it. Rogam is not an act of force, but of reconciliation. It does not fight the body, but gently guides it, so that harm is avoided. And in that gentleness, we see something deeply human, not dominance, but the ability to listen, to understand, and to adjust. If we return to the quiet rooms of the past, to empty cradles, to silent grief, then the arrival of Rogam is like a soft light, not blinding, but enough to transform everything. It does not erase what happened, but it prevents the same pain from repeating. And as you listen, in this slow, quiet space before sleep, you may feel something beyond science, a human journey, from darkness towards small lights, of understanding, of healing, of protecting life. You do not need to understand every mechanism or remember every detail. It is enough to know that somewhere in history, humans found a way to turn pain into knowledge, and knowledge into safety. And that alone is enough to bring a quiet sense of peace. Like your heartbeat now, steady, natural, yet protected by everything humanity has learned over thousands of years. And in that awareness, you may soften a little more, letting thoughts settle. No need to hold them, no need to analyze. Just let them pass, like history itself, which has slowly grown quiet, and you too can gently drift into sleep. And if you listen a little deeper, beyond numbers, beyond medical terms, you may feel that this story is not only about blood, but about a deeply human journey. The journey of facing what we do not understand without turning away. In the past, when a child could not survive, humans could not explain it, and so they gave it meaning: fate, curse, punishment, a way for the mind to create order within chaos. As Carl Gustav Jung described, this is how the unconscious seeks meaning. But as knowledge slowly emerges, as hidden patterns are revealed, those old stories fade, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer needed. And in their place, a new kind of safety appears, not from belief, but from understanding. And yet, no matter how far science goes, there is always a quiet space, a place not fully explained. And perhaps it is this space that makes the story gentler, more human. Like how you do not need to understand every dream to sleep peacefully within it. Rogam, or any advancement, is only a small part of a much larger picture where humans continue learning to live with uncertainty. And in that journey, they do not become all-powerful, only more gentle, more aware, more capable of caring for life. So as you lie there, feeling your heartbeat, remember, within you is not only blood, but a long history of questions, of mistakes, of discoveries, and of healing. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to control everything. It is enough to know that you are here in a quiet moment, supported by all that came before. And that is enough to let go and gently drift into sleep. There was a time in the long, quiet corridors of European palaces when people believed in a beautiful yet fragile idea, blue blood, a metaphor for those born into power, into lineage, into the belief that they carried something purer than the rest of the world. But if we listen more deeply, behind that beauty is a very human story, vulnerable and sometimes sad. Among those with Rh-negative blood, a noticeable proportion appeared within European aristocratic families, not something mystical, but the result of a simple yet powerful reality close intermarriage. When royal families married within narrow circles to preserve power, to protect lineage, they also created a closed biological system where genetic traits, both beneficial and harmful, were repeated and amplified across generations. And within that repetition, differences like H-negative became more concentrated, but alongside them came unavoidable consequences. One clear example is hemophilia, a hereditary blood disorder that spread through many royal families, especially among the descendants of Queen Victoria. Children were born carrying a special blood, yet also carrying great risk. A small wound could become severe. A minor accident could lead to irreversible consequences. And within grand ornate rooms, where everything seemed controlled, there was always a quiet, invisible fear. If we look more deeply, we see a subtle paradox. Humans sought purity through limitation, through closure, yet that very closure weakened the system. Like water, when it no longer flows, it grows still and loses its vitality. Carl Gustav Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," and in the story of Blue Blood, we see this clearly. Systems that seem perfect eventually face their own limits and must change, slowly, inevitably. This reflects a deeper truth, not only in biology, but in the human psyche. When we try to preserve a perfect image, a fixed identity, we begin to exclude what does not fit, what feels different. Yet those very parts are what maintain balance. When they disappear, imbalance quietly begins. And perhaps this is the gentlest lesson within the story. Special does not always mean better. Sometimes it simply means different. And difference needs openness, space to blend, to adjust, to find balance. If we return to those palaces, those royal families, we may feel that behind all symbols of power, they were human, just like us. They worried, they grieved, they tried to protect what they loved, and sometimes they made mistakes in that very effort. And when night falls, when titles and roles fade, what remains is simply a heartbeat, a flow of blood, like anyone else. No longer blue or red, no longer noble or ordinary, only life, simple yet precious. And In that realization, you may feel something soften, as all ideas of difference gently dissolve, leaving behind a deeper peace, that you do not need to be special to belong fully to this world. And as that thought settles, you may relax a little more, letting the story close softly as sleep draws nearer. And if we go a little deeper still into the idea of blue blood, we begin to see that what draws people is not biology itself, but the meaning they attach to it. Throughout history, blood has been a powerful symbol of origin, of identity, of continuity between past and present. And when a group believes their blood is different, they are not only speaking of the body, but of their place in the world. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, this becomes an archetype, a symbol of power, of selection, of separation. And because of that, it is both alluring and dangerous. For when people believe they are different, they begin to draw boundaries, and boundaries, if not opened, become walls. In royal families, those walls became inbreeding, repetition, a closed system, until it weakened from within. And this is not only true in biology, but in the human mind. When a person holds too tightly to a fixed identity, rejecting change, rejecting difference, they too become less flexible, more fragile over time. And perhaps this is the gentle message for you now before sleep, that life does not grow in closure, but in openness, in exchange, in allowing the new to enter, even when it brings uncertainty. Those who tried to preserve purity eventually faced its consequences. But history did not stop there. Humans learned, changed, expanded, moving towards systems more flexible, more balanced. And so, blue blood is no longer a symbol of superiority, but a quiet reminder that every system, no matter how strong, needs balance. So tonight, as you rest in the quiet, you may release the need to be special, to stand apart, to be different, because sometimes it is in simply flowing with life that we feel safest, most grounded, most at peace. You do not need a special blood to belong. It is enough to be part of life itself. And as that thought spreads gently, like a soft wave, your body may relax, your breath slow, and all stories fade into the distance, making space for a quiet stillness where nothing more needs to be. Understood, only rest and deep sleep. When humans face what they cannot explain, they often do two things at once. They analyze, search for data, connect fragments of science, and at the same time, they allow imagination to softly fill the gaps. And the story of rain-negative origins is one such place where science and quiet reflection coexist. Some hypotheses are simple, grounded in everyday biology, that H-negative is merely a mutation, a small change in DNA, occurring long ago, not intentional, not meaningful, just one of many imperfections nature creates, which sometimes remain, spread, and quietly accompany humanity through time. Seen this way, rain-negative is not a mystery, but a gentle reminder that life is not perfect, and that imperfection creates diversity. But then, there are deeper hypotheses, carrying the feeling of history, that HH-negative may be linked to Neanderthals who once lived alongside Homo sapiens. Perhaps, in their encounters, genes were shared, and some traits remain within us today, unnoticed, like a biological memory of ancient meetings. Other ideas turn to early humans, like Cro-Magnon, where a small isolated group may have carried Rh negative, preserved through separation, becoming concentrated over time. And then there is geography, migration, distance, humans moving across mountains, oceans, lands, carrying genes with them, shaping biology as much as place. But what is most interesting is not which hypothesis is correct, but that none are certain. And within that uncertainty, there is a quiet space, a place not yet filled, where curiosity, humility, and wonder can remain. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious." And perhaps Rh negative does not need to be fully explained to hold its meaning, because sometimes not knowing allows us to listen more deeply, to think more slowly, to feel more fully. And so, as you rest, you do not need to choose a theory or reach a conclusion. You can simply let the possibilities drift past like gentle waves. H negative may be mutation, ancient inheritance, migration, or all at once. And you do not need to know to feel that you carry within you a long human story. And as that thought softens, you may feel lighter, as if questions no longer need answers right now. They can wait, as history has waited for thousands of years. And in that waiting, there is a quiet calm, enough for you to relax, to breathe more slowly, and let your mind release its hold. Only a gentle drifting remains between what is known and what is not. And you may drift with it, slowly, deeply, into sleep. And if we go deeper still, not through data, but through quiet observation, we begin to see that what makes Rh negative special is not itself, but how humans respond to it. For a long time, whenever faced with difference, humans give it meaning, a small group, with a rare trait, and stories begin to form. Perhaps they are special, perhaps they have a purpose, perhaps they are something more. But if we step back and look calmly, we see something simple. Life does not need a special purpose to exist. Many things exist simply because they have not disappeared, and Rh negative may be one of those things, not superior, but simply able to remain. And rather than diminishing its mystery, this reveals something deeper, that beauty exists in what is quiet, ordinary, unspoken. For countless generations, Rh negative has passed from one life to another, through people who never knew they were different. They lived, loved, worked, had children, and passed on, leaving behind a subtle, continuous trace. No glory, no legend, only continuity. And in that, you may feel a quiet connection between yourself and those who came before. Whether you carry Rh negative or not, you carry something similar, fragments of memory, passed through generations, unseen, yet present. And perhaps the real question is not where H negative comes from, but why we feel the need to know. And in that question, we return to ourselves, to the desire to understand, to belong, to find meaning. But sometimes, peace does not come from answers, but from accepting that some questions remain for a very long time. And that is okay. You do not need to be part of something special to have value. You do not need a mysterious origin to matter, because simply being here, breathing, listening, is already the result of countless quiet miracles. And as that thought settles, you may release the unfinished questions No need to resolve, no need to conclude. Just let them pass, like thin clouds across the night sky. Your breath slows, your body softens, and your mind holds on to nothing. H negative, or any mystery, is only a small part of a much larger whole, and you are already within it. And right now, without knowing everything, without understanding everything, you can still, gently, let yourself sink into a deep stillness and allow sleep to come. When science reaches its limits, when data grows sparse and answers no longer fill the space, something natural happens. Imagination begins to speak. And here, controversial theories about Ra negative arise, not only as explanations, but as collective dreams, reflecting a deep human longing to understand who we are and where we come from. Some say H negative is a trace of a lost civilization, like Atlantis, a submerged world of advanced beings, and those with H negative are its remaining descendants, carrying forgotten memory. There is no scientific proof, yet the idea persists because it touches something deep, the belief in a lost golden age, and that we still carry echoes of it. Other theories, more spiritual, speak of Nephilim, a crossing between human and something beyond. Here, H negative becomes almost sacred, a sign of something not entirely of Earth. And then, more daring ideas suggest connections to extraterrestrials, a blending between humanity and another intelligence. It may sound distant, but psychologically, it reflects something real, that feeling that a part of us is unfamiliar, not fully explainable. And in many ways, these theories are not simply true or false, they are symbols. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, they are archetypes, ancient patterns, helping us express what logic cannot. And perhaps, what matters most is not whether they are correct, but why they appear and why they attract us. When science leaves a gap, the mind fills it, not to deceive, but to preserve meaning. And as you listen in a relaxed state, you may feel that science and imagination are not opposites, but two paths toward the same mystery, one through data, one through symbol, both born from human curiosity. And as these thoughts pass, you do not need to believe, nor reject. You can simply observe, like watching distant stars, knowing some things exist, not to be fully explained, but to be felt. And in that space, H negative becomes more than biology, a small doorway into larger questions of origin, identity, meaning. And as the night deepens, those questions may also soften. No answers needed now, only quiet and a gentle sense that you are part of the mystery. And that is enough. As we enter this part, it is no longer only a story of biology, but of the human mind itself, a deep realm that Carl Gustav Jung spent his life exploring. Here, beliefs, symbols, and even the unproven hold real power over how we see ourselves. Stories about H negative having stronger intuition, greater sensitivity, higher intelligence may seem like fragments of imagination, but they do not arise randomly. They reflect an ancient need to feel different, to feel special, to feel more than ordinary. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in that journey, we pass through illusions, trying on different identities, seeking meaning. When someone learns they are H negative, a rare group, the mind begins to weave stories, not out of illusion, but out of a search for meaning. And when science leaves a gap, imagination fills it with symbols of intuition, of hidden ability, of deeper connection. But gently returning to reality, we see there is no clear evidence that H-negative grants special powers. And this may seem disappointing, but through Jung's view, it is not denial. It is an invitation to look inward, to see that specialness does not come from biology, but from awareness. Because every human being, regardless of blood type, holds a unique inner world, unrepeatable, unshared. And perhaps true specialness lies there in how you feel, how you think, how you connect. And in the quiet of night, you may sense this more clearly, that you do not need any special ability to have meaning. Simply being here, breathing, feeling, is already enough. And perhaps that is the real ability to pause, to listen, to touch the stillness within. A quiet ability, unseen, unproven, yet deep enough to bring you back to yourself, gently, slowly, into sleep. And as we go deeper still, into that subtle space where belief and reality meet, we begin to see that these stories are not misunderstandings, but a language of the soul, an ancient language expressing what cannot be spoken through logic. In Jung's view, these symbols, special abilities, strong intuition, connection to the unseen, reflect the collective unconscious, a shared depth of mind, where we are not separate, but part of something older, larger, and perhaps when someone feels intuitive, it is not their blood, but their ability to listen to subtle signals that others overlook. When someone feels different, it may not mean separation, but closeness to their inner self. And in the quiet of night, as outer layers fade, we begin to understand that the desire to be special is not a mistake, but a step towards self-awareness, a journey from seeking difference to accepting simplicity, to realizing that simplicity itself is extraordinary, because within the ordinary, millions of things are happening. Your heart beating, your breath flowing, your blood moving, quietly sustaining life. None of it needs to be special, to be essential. And when you truly feel this, you no longer need stories of special powers to feel whole. You can feel completeness right here, in this moment, in your simple presence. And as those stories dissolve, like mist in soft morning light, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer needed, you may feel lighter. You do not need to be more to be at peace. You do not need a hidden origin to belong, because you have always been so. From a very long time ago, from before you even knew concepts like Ron negative or Ron positive. And as you allow yourself to gently release those thoughts, your body too begins to soften. Your breath becomes deeper, slower, quieter, like the ocean when the wind has stopped and the surface returns to its natural stillness. And perhaps in this stillness, you may notice something very gentle, that what you have always been searching for was never about becoming different, but about returning to yourself fully and peacefully. And when you see that, you no longer need to try, no longer need to prove anything, only gently close your eyes and allow your body to drift into a deep sleep, soft like an ancient current that has always known how to carry you back to the most peaceful place. As we gently move into this part, as if turning another layer of human memory, we begin to see that the same small biological detail, a blood type, a protein on the surface of a cell, can hold completely different meanings, depending on where it is seen and how it is interpreted. And here, in the contrast between Japan and the West, we do not only see science, but the collective psyche, quiet beliefs, and the ways humans try to understand themselves. In Japan, a culture that values subtle observation and social harmony, the ABO blood groups have become more than biology. They have become a kind of language for personality. Type A is seen as careful, responsible. Type B as creative, free. Type O as strong, decisive. Type A, B as complex, unpredictable. These descriptions, though not scientifically grounded, have quietly entered daily life, in friendships, relationships, even job selection. But if we look deeper, this is not simply incorrect belief. It is a way for society to create stability. When the world feels too complex, the mind creates categories to make it easier to understand, easier to hold. And blood type, clear and fixed, becomes a perfect tool. Meanwhile, in the West, especially among those interested in Rh negative, the story takes a different path. Instead of personality, it becomes surrounded by mystery, stories of unknown origins, of blood, not of this earth, of ancient civilizations. Here, instead of seeking order, people seek uniqueness, a sense of being different, of not just being part of the crowd. And if we listen slowly, deeply, we begin to see that these two views, though different in form, share the same root: the need to understand oneself and to find one's place in the world. One creates order, the other creates meaning, but both are deeply human responses to the vastness of existence. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, these are expressions of archetypes, patterns within the collective unconscious, ways the mind fills the space between what is known and what is not. Perhaps, when the Japanese speak of blood type and personality, they are seeking harmony, and when Western narratives surround Ra negative with mystery, they are seeking transcendence. But if we step back and observe it all gently, we see something very soft, that no interpretation is entirely right or entirely wrong. Each one reflects a part of the human mind, a part of fear, of hope, of the longing to understand. And perhaps what matters is not which blood type you carry, but how you choose to see it. You can use it to separate yourself or to connect more deeply. You can turn it into a story of isolation or a story of belonging. And as you lie there, in the quiet of the night, you may notice all labels, all categories, all stories becoming lighter, more distant, like clouds passing across the sky. And beneath all of that, there is still you, a person breathing, living, feeling each moment. You do not need to be A or B, O or AB, H positive or H negative. You are still yourself, and that has always been enough. And as that thought settles, your body softens, your breath slows, your mind quiets, as if every question, every comparison, every need to understand everything is gently dissolving, making space for something simple to peaceful that you do not need to decode the whole world in order to rest. And tonight, you can simply close your eyes and drift into sleep, gently, like the quiet current that has sustained life for thousands of years. And as we remain in this stillness, we may go a little deeper, not to find more answers, but to feel more clearly what it means to be human. Because beneath all stories about blood, about difference, about belief, There is something very simple: the need to be understood and to belong. For a long time, humans have asked, "Who am I? And what makes me special?" And when no clear answer appears, we look to the smallest signs: a blood type, a trait, a tiny detail, and slowly we give it meaning. Not because it holds magic, but because the mind needs something to hold on to in a world so vast. And if you listen carefully, you will feel that in both perspectives, Japan or the West, there is a quiet kindness, a desire to understand others faster, to love more easily, or a desire to believe we have a special role, so life feels meaningful. And that is not wrong. It is simply human. But like all waves, these beliefs, when seen through a calmer mind, begin to soften. You may realize you do not need to belong to a special group to have value. You do not need a different blood to be meaningful, because your existence, your awareness, is already rare, already precious. And when that thought appears, light as a breeze, you may feel something inside you begin to relax. No more need to prove, no more need to compare, only a simple feeling that you are here, and that is enough. Let the stories about blood, science, myth fade into the distance, like sounds dissolving in the night. No need to hold them, no need to remember everything. Only keep the feeling that you have journeyed, and now you may rest. Your breath slows a little, your heartbeat softens, your body lets go. And in that state, you are no longer a special case, nor a question to solve. You are simply a human being, allowed to rest, allowed to release, allowed to drift into sleep, naturally, as everything in nature does, slowly, gently, completely, just like you, in this moment. As we leave behind the mist of theories, of special blood stories, and return to the very real world of medicine, we begin to notice something quietly profound sometimes. What is most mysterious is not what is distant, but what is most practical. H-negative blood does not need a myth to be important, because in the most fragile moments of life, it quietly becomes a deciding factor between life and death. Imagine a very real situation, an accident, an emergency surgery, a body losing blood faster than it can recover. In those moments, no one thinks about origins or theories or whether blood is special. There is only one need to live. And in that moment, O-negative blood appears quietly, like a universal giver, able to help almost anyone without perfect matching. It becomes a bridge, a second chance, silent, uncelebrated, yet always there, waiting in hospital blood banks for the moment life calls upon it. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, this becomes a symbol of the self, the whole within us, where all differences are brought into harmony. O-negative, in its own way, is not for itself, but for connection. And this reveals something gentle, that sometimes the greatest value is not in being unique, but in being able to connect. Not in standing out, but in supporting. Not in separation, but in integration. And when we see this, the whole system of blood types becomes something larger. What once seemed strange now becomes essential. Diversity creates compatibility, creates options, creates the possibility for humans to help one another. There is a quiet beauty here, one we rarely notice, because it happens every day, in emergency rooms, in silent transfusions, in bodies slowly recovering. Not a miracle, yet almost one. And if we feel deeper, we sense something human, that despite all differences, we can become life for each other. Blood, so personal, can become a shared gift, given without knowing who will receive it. And perhaps this is what matters most, not where H negative comes from, not whether it is special, but that it exists, here, within you, or within someone else, as part of something larger, a system where life continues, not through one individual, but through exchange, through sharing, through trust. And as you feel this, you may notice a soft peace, that you are not separate, that you belong, that even what seems most different in you may be the way you connect to the world. And as that thought flows, slowly, gently, you may let it pass. No need to hold it, only to feel that somewhere in the quiet of the night, in the steady rhythm of your heart, your body continues the story of life, silently, steadily, and completely. And as we listen even deeper, we begin to sense that the meaning of raw negative is not only in emergency rooms, but in something deeper, where science and inner experience meet. Each drop of blood is not just biology, but a living memory carrying the story of countless generations who lived, adapted, endured so that you could be here. And in that flow, Rh negative is no longer just absence, but a quiet trace of an endless journey. And perhaps there is comfort in this, that nothing in you is unnecessary, that even what you do not fully understand may still belong in a larger whole. And as you lie there, in the quiet night, you may feel that your body is not only yours, but part of a much longer story, one that did not begin with you and will not end with you, yet continues. Through each quiet heartbeat, let that thought pass, like a soft wave. No need to hold it, no need to go further, only to feel that within complexity there is gentleness, a gentleness that comes from knowing you belong. You are part of this flow, and you are not alone. Even when you do not understand everything, anyone, in any situation, could be saved. Not because of the chance of finding a matching donor, but because we have learned to create what was once considered the very essence of life. And here, a gentle question arises. When we can create blood, when we can rewrite the rules of biology, are we moving closer to understanding, or slowly drifting away from something deeply original? That question does not need a clear answer. It only needs to be asked, like a quiet pause between endless progress, because no matter how far science advances, there remains a part of us that cannot be fully measured by data or experiments, a part that is still very deep, where each heartbeat is not only a contraction of muscle, but a symbolic rhythm, a reminder that life is not only existence, but experience. And as you lie there, listening in the gentle darkness, you may begin to realize that all these studies, these theories, these discoveries are not only meant to answer the question, what are we, but to lead you to a deeper one. How are you experiencing your life right now? Perhaps the mystery of Ra negative will one day be fully understood. Perhaps every small detail will be explained, but even then, there will always be other mysteries, other depths, waiting quietly to be discovered. And that is not a flaw, but the beauty of living in a world that is still not fully known. Let that thought pass, like a soft breeze. No need to hold it, no need to explain it, only to feel that right now, within your body, within the slow movement of your blood. The past, the present, and the future are all existing together, very quietly, very deeply, and very real. As we move further into the present, where science no longer only observes, but begins to intervene, adjust, and even recreate life, the story of Ra-negative slowly transforms from an ancient mystery into a doorway toward the future. And in that space, in laboratories glowing softly in the night, humans are gently touching the deepest layers of their own bodies, as if reading again a book that nature has been writing for hundreds of thousands of years. Modern research suggests that blood types are not only labels, but may be connected to how the body responds to the world. Some studies indicate that H-negative may be linked to slightly different immune responses, even in recent pandemics like COVID-19, where those with H-negative blood may have a slightly lower risk of severe complications. Though these findings still need confirmation, they reveal something subtle, that even the smallest differences within the body can shape how we experience life and how we face illness. But perhaps more meaningful is not whether Rh-negative is better or worse, but how modern science is beginning to listen, instead of only trying to control. Through the lens of Carl Gustav Jung, a human being is not only biological, but symbolic, each trait carrying meaning, whether we are aware of it or not. And perhaps, as science explores these subtle differences, humanity is slowly learning to understand itself more deeply. In another direction, research into artificial blood opens a vision that feels almost mythical, a world where people are no longer limited by the rarity of blood types like H-negative, a world where anyone, in any circumstance, could be saved, not by chance, but by understanding. And again, a quiet question returns. When we can create blood, rewrite biology, are we coming closer to truth or moving away from something essential? The question remains open, like silence within progress, because no matter how far we go, there is always a part of us that cannot be reduced to numbers. A still, deep place where the heartbeat is more than function, it is meaning. And as you lie there, listening softly, you may feel that all knowledge, all discovery, is not only about what we are, but about how we feel being alive. Perhaps one day everything will be explained, but still new mysteries will emerge, and that is not a limitation, but a quiet beauty. Let that thought drift, like a whispering wind. No need to hold it, only to feel that within you, right now, your blood carries time itself, past, present, future, flowing together, in silence, in depth, in truth. As our journey gently approaches its end, what remains is not a final answer, but a familiar feeling that the more we understand, the more we see there is still so much unknown. H-negative, after all the theories, the debates, the stories between science and imagination, remains there, like a quiet pause in the long music of evolution. Not a miracle, not a hidden supernatural secret, but a small detail, enough to make us pause and wonder about existence itself. In the view of Carl Gustav Jung, humans naturally seek meaning beyond the material. When facing the unexplained, the mind does not only observe, it creates stories, symbols, and places them within the inner world. H-negative, in this way, becomes a symbol of difference, of the unknown, of the unconscious, something we reach toward but never fully hold. And here, a gentle shift begins. When we release the need to explain everything, when we stop trying to make it special, we begin to see it differently, in a softer, truer light. Not as something to separate us, but as a natural part of biological diversity, like countless other variations within the human body. And perhaps, the deeper question is not where it comes from, but why we long to know so much. Is it because, deep within, we want to believe we carry something special, that we are different, chosen, meaningful, and yet, as Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in that, there is something very gentle. You do not need a rare blood type or a mysterious origin to be special, because your existence itself is already an unrepeatable result of countless generations, countless moments, countless changes, long before you were born. Imagine, within each drop of your blood, there is a distant past. People who lived, struggled, loved, and passed life forward. H positive or H negative, in the end, is only a small part of that flow. It does not make you more or less. It is simply one way life continues. And as you see that, slowly, gently, you may feel a quiet release. No need to seek uniqueness outside. No need to hold on to stories. No need to prove anything. You only need to be here, in this body, in this breath, in this moment. Because, in the end, your value is not in biology, but in how you live, how you feel, how you connect with the world and with yourself. And tonight, as everything slows, you may allow yourself to release unanswered questions, to let go of the need to understand everything, and simply remain with the feeling that you are part of a very long story, a story without a clear beginning, without a fixed end, yet complete in every moment you live. And perhaps that is the most beautiful mystery, not to be solved, but to be felt gently as you close your eyes and let sleep carry you like a natural current within that flow. And if we remain a little longer, without rushing to conclude, we begin to see that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but to slow the mind. H negative, in its deeper meaning, may not be a biological question, but a doorway leading you back to yourself. Because whenever we face the unknown, two responses arise: the need to explain and the sense of wonder. And if that wonder is held gently, it becomes stillness, very close to sleep. No tension to solve, no pressure to understand, only a quiet acceptance that the world is larger than what we can hold. And in that space, H negative is no longer a puzzle, but a gentle reminder that your body, like your mind, holds depths you have not yet touched. Parts of you work every day, silently, precisely, without needing your awareness. Your heart beats, your blood flows, life continues, even when you do not think about it. And, in a peaceful way, this is just like sleep. You cannot force sleep. You can only allow it. Just as you cannot force understanding, you can only live with mystery. And perhaps, when you stop trying to understand, you come closer to truth. Not as an answer, but as a feeling that you are exactly where you need to be, in this body, in this moment, within the long flow of life. And as that feeling moves gently through you, like a soft wind, your body relaxes, Your breath slows, your heart softens, and all questions fade into the distance. Not gone, but no longer needed. Right now, you do not need to know where H negative comes from or what it means, because in this moment, the only meaning you need is rest. Let unfinished thoughts drift away like distant clouds, no holding, no chasing, only watching them dissolve into a quiet space, wide and deep. And there, you are no longer searching for answers, but simply a small, gentle part of a greater flow, carrying you slowly, softly, into sleep. And as the story comes to a close, not with an explanation, but with a feeling, we begin to understand that what matters most is not what you learned, but what you felt. Not H positive or H negative, not theories or debates, but the flow within your body, right now. Blood, so familiar we rarely notice it, is one of the oldest stories you carry. In every movement, there is memory, there are traces, there is continuation of a journey hundreds of thousands of years long. You do not need to see it or fully understand it. It is still there, faithfully continuing its only purpose, to sustain life. Through the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, beneath conscious awareness, there is a deeper layer, holding not personal memory, but collective memory. And perhaps, blood is one of its clearest expressions, a living memory, without words, without images, yet present in every cell. When you place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat, you are not only hearing biology, you are touching an ancient rhythm, one that existed long before you and will continue, even when you do not notice it. Each beat is not just motion, but a quiet whisper, repeating steadily that you are alive, that you are here, that you belong to something greater. And in this moment, as everything grows still, you may allow yourself to feel that, without analysis, without naming, just listening. Your breath moves in and out, your heartbeat steady, your body growing heavier, warmer, quieter. You do not need to solve every mystery or understand every history, because life does not require understanding, only permission to unfold. Just like sleep, you do not need to know when it begins. You do not need to control it. You only need to let go and trust that your body knows the way. Whether you are H positive or Ray negative, whether you understand or not, at the deepest level, you are the same as all who came before, carrying that ancient flow, continuing quietly, naturally, into rest. And tonight, as you lie there, in your own quiet stillness, you do not need to become anyone else. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to search for more answers. Just feel that your blood is still flowing, your heart is still beating, your breath is still moving, and all of it, together, is gently carrying you. Like a slow-moving river, unhurried, unstopped, not needing to know its destination, simply continuing in its natural way. And as you let yourself drift with that current, each thought, each worry, each unfinished question begins to feel more distant, smaller, softer, until they dissolve into a space that is very gentle, very deep, and very quiet. In that place, there is nothing left to explain, nothing left to understand, only presence, light, soft, and real. And then, without effort, without even noticing, you may find yourself drifting slowly, peacefully, into sleep. And If there is still a small space in your mind, a part that remains awake, still listening, let that part not be thought, but simply presence, like a soft light, not shining brightly, only enough for you to feel that you are still here, still safe, still supported by your own body. You may imagine the blood within you as a quiet ocean where there is no noise, no crashing waves, only slow, deep, steady movement, like the ocean beneath its surface, where light does not reach. Yet, life continues, quietly, and just like that, within you, there are processes unfolding, without needing attention, without needing control, yet still precise, still steady, still whole, in every moment. Perhaps you once felt that you needed to understand everything to feel at ease. But tonight, you can try something else. Something very simple: to trust. To trust that your body knows what to do, that your heartbeat needs no guidance, that your breath needs no control, and that sleep will come in its own natural way. All the stories we have passed through, about origins, about theories, about the unexplained, can now drift away, like distant stars, fading as the night deepens. You do not need to hold them or continue thinking about them. They have already done their work, which is to bring you closer to this stillness. And in this state, you may allow your eyes to grow a little heavier, your breath a little slower, your body a little softer, as if each part of you is gently turning off the lights, each room of the mind, closing one by one, naturally, without effort. If a thought appears, let it pass, like a thin cloud, no holding, no pushing away, just letting it go. Because there is nothing more you need to do. Tonight, there is no task to complete, no question to answer, only one thing: to rest. And as you continue listening, you may notice everything becoming slower, lighter, softer, as if the whole world is quieting with you, moving with you into a deeper, safer stillness. You are not alone in this moment, because within you is a long history, millions of years of life, countless generations that have breathed, lived, slept, and now all of that continues in you. So, just let yourself drift, no holding, no controlling, only gently letting go and allowing your body to do the rest. And if you can still hear this voice, let it become distant, softer, like a passing breeze, reminding you that everything is okay, everything is unfolding as it should, and you only need to rest. Wishing you a deep sleep, a peaceful sleep, a gentle sleep. And if you feel that journeys like this help you relax, help you fall asleep more easily, you can gently subscribe to Stories for Sleep, so that each night there is always a soft story waiting for you to return. And as we reach the final moments of this journey, you may begin to see that everything you have just heard is not only a story about a rare blood type or the theories around it, but something deeper, a story about being human, about how we search for meaning even in the smallest things within us. Perhaps what makes rage negative feel mysterious is not only science, but the way our minds respond to difference. When something does not fully fit what we already know, we begin to imagine, to question, to give it meaning beyond what is real. And that is not wrong. It is simply human. As Carl Gustav Jung once said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. And perhaps Stories like this are not meant to give final answers, but to guide you back inward, to see that what is truly remarkable is not whether you are H positive or H negative, but that you are alive, aware, present, in this moment. You do not need to be special in the way the world defines it to have value, because your existence itself is already something that cannot be repeated. The blood within you, whatever its form, is the result of millions of years of life, of countless stories, of people who lived, loved, endured, so that you could be here. And as you feel that, you may notice a quiet peace, deep, gentle, as if there is nothing left to prove, nothing left to become, only to be. And now, as everything settles, you may let your mind slow down, like a river finally reaching calm waters. Feel your breath, soft and steady. No need to change it, only to notice. Feel your body growing heavier, more relaxed, as if each muscle is letting go, each thought drifting away, and you being supported by your bed, by the space around you, by the gentle tiredness of the day. If a thought arises, let it pass, like a thin cloud, no holding, no chasing, just watching it fade. Because tonight, you do not need to understand everything, to solve every mystery, to become anything more. Tonight, you only need to rest. And in that rest, everything will gently find its place, quietly, naturally, just as your body always knows how to heal, without you needing to notice. All the stories about raw negative, about history, about humanity, can now move into the distance, like waves that have touched the shore and faded, leaving behind a still surface. And in that stillness, you may let yourself sink, without worry, without hurry, only softness and a deep feeling that everything is okay. If you can still hear this voice, let it fade, softer, more distant, like the final whisper of night, reminding you, you have done enough. You have come far enough. And now, it is time to rest. Wishing you a deep sleep, a soft sleep, a peaceful sleep. And if these gentle stories help you rest, help you unwind, you can take a moment to subscribe to Stories for Sleep, so that each night, when you need a place to return, a calm voice will be there. And now, close your eyes, let go, and sleep well.